So there are three aspects of personal change that we will be talking about as part of our curriculum. The three dimensions or the three aspects of change that we'll be talking about are choice, motivation, and paradigm. So when we talk about choice, we talk about the decisions that people make. When we talk about motivations, we talk about the values that support why people do what they do. And the paradigm is the aspect of looking at how people see the world and how that impacts their behavior, why or the world view that they have around what all of these three things mean for them. We'll also be talking about kind of these secondary aspects of the habit, the need, and the requirement of having vision to be able to see into the future or make determinations of how you want to align yourself, your current behaviors with future behaviors, and then how those thoughts, those individual thoughts contribute to your vision and the way that you use the way that you behave in terms of looking at your habits. So we'll start off first with choice. The the central theme is coming from William Glasser's choice theory, which basically says that people do what they want when they want, and there's not much that an outside force can do to influence or change the direction of someone's particular desires. And so we're constantly making choices. And so we'll talk about behavioral psychology, we'll talk about the importance of having the ability to make choices. We'll also talk about logic versus emotions, and then how those kind of act out in these overarching axioms of theories around this idea of choice. And we'll also talk about causality. And so the idea that if I do something, there are ramifications for that behavior. And so we'll speak about that. So next, let's move over to this concept of motivation, and we'll talk about the difference between constructive motivation and coercive motivation. Um, Constructive motivation helps you move in the direction of your goals, and coercive motivation is being forced into, compelled, talked into, in some cases, harassed into a certain methodology of behavior. Next, we'll talk about affirmations. So these things that we say to ourselves to keep us motivated in the direction of our goals, and our self talk is the concentration of the those conversations we have in our heads that we talk ourselves into and out of particular things, given our particular orientation towards our goals. And then we'll talk about enthusiasm and how we need to prioritize things. So motivation is that second piece. Now we'll move to paradigms, and paradigms simply are the ways that we see the world, and we'll talk about how people build schema. We'll talk about scotomas, which are these blind spots that we typically have, or that we've been raised with, or that have come up for us as we've learned about certain individuals or the way certain groups of people respond or act, or how we're supposed to act towards them. We'll talk about comfort zones and Johari's window. Those will be some key aspects that we'll talk about in terms of looking at one's paradigm. When we talk about, so now we'll move back up to habits, and habits are simply the prioritizing of our behaviors over a long period of time. And to have good habits, one must first start off with having good routines. Good routines make good habits. So a routine differs from a habit in that routines are things that you concentrate on, you focus on, you give thought, you plan, you schedule. It actually feels quite artificial when you do these routines until you get to a point where those routines become your habits. They become automatic. And so a habit can be defined as a system of routines that has become automatic. These behaviors that have become automatic and that help us propel ourselves towards our goals. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about this 2% rule, which is that over a long period of time, it's better to do 2% of a thing over a long period of time than try to do something cold turkey or to automatically change your behavior. Next, we'll talk about vision, and that becomes very important in terms of our goal setting because that helps to drive all of these other things in terms of how we will move into the future. And so goal setting becomes important to that. Having mission statements for ourselves and for our families become extremely important. Organizations typically have a mission statement because that drives all of the behaviors that that organization should be manifesting to fulfill its vision. And so we'll talk about actions and tasks and affirmations as they relate to fulfilling the vision and creating that that planned ideal existence. And lastly, we'll talk about thoughts. We'll talk about the relationship between attitudes, which is really about goal achievement, beliefs, which are systems of thoughts that combine themselves to create this thing called a belief system or a belief. We'll talk about the importance of gravity and the forces that pull us and why it's easy to make change and why it sometimes is difficult to make change. We'll also talk about deposits and withdrawals in terms of personal relationships. When do we make deposits and how do we make withdrawals? And what happens if we make too many withdrawals? What does that proverbial account start to look like? So we'll talk about that. Lastly, we'll talk about effective thinking, and we'll also talk about problem solving, how to be a creator in problem solving in your organization as well as in your personal life. So these are the personal aspects of change that we will talk about as we explore those particular ways of changing our own behavior or changing the behavior of people in our organization. So I look forward to working with you on this particular project, and we will talk about that soon. Thanks.